Oh, wait a minute. Music stopped. So there you go.
Is that
I think there's some guy there. I don't know. Wait.
Good evening, everyone. Dear ICFC friends, honorable guests, Deputy High Commissioner of India to Canada, Mr. Anshuman Gaur, distinguished speakers, and my fellow esteemed board members. Welcome to the India-Canada Friendship Circle, also known as ICFC. For those of you who are new to this forum, my name is Roohi Ahmed, and I'm president of ICFC. ICFC was founded in Ottawa in 2004. It is a registered nonprofit, non-religious, nonpartisan organization that brings together people and prominent speakers in a peaceful dialogue on diverse issues of interest to Canada and India. We are very pleased to be collaborating with the High Commission of India on this event focused on sport as a cultural unifier. I will be introducing my co-host, Mr. Anshuman Gaur, shortly, who will deliver some introductory remarks. He will be followed by Mr. Richard Provencher, who will introduce our guest speakers and moderate the panel. And around 8:10 p.m. or so, we will open up the floor to the audience for questions to the panel. Today's ICFC lecture is the fourth in a series of events that we've held this year under the theme of diversity and inclusion. When meeting the speakers for this event, we all discovered our mutual love and passion for sports. Besides its physical and mental health benefits, sports is also very much a part of national culture. Like music, art, and poetry, sport is characteristic of a nation and a unifying force. It is equally enjoyable and can be participated in by one and all. Sports also has an international appeal that brings different communities and nations together, regardless of political and ethnic diversity. Sports also evolve with time, geography, and the movement of people as they introduce new traditions and games into local communities. The First Nations of Canada founded and played lacrosse long before Canada became a country, and lacrosse became Canada's official summer sport. New games were introduced as the settlers arrived, and baseball and hockey have also become national favorites. And finally, communications technologies have given sports its global appeal by bringing our favorite games to the TV screens, phones, and tablets. Whether we are all cheering for our favorite athletes and teams at the Olympics, the Pan Am Games, the FIFA World Cup, Wimbledon, the NBA, NHL, among other tournaments, we are all bound by sport and cheering while watching the same games, but from different corners of the earth. And that is the beauty of and the unifying aspect of sport. Sports diplomacy is another tool for policymakers and international agencies to create stronger ties between people and tackle issues like poverty, gender equality, and climate change. The first and possibly best example of sport diplomacy and international cooperation is the Olympic Games. A few Canadian examples of sports diplomacy that I wish to highlight include in June 2019, the Canadian and Dutch ambassadors in Qatar and Kuwait organized viewing parties for the final group stage match of the FIFA Women's World Cup contest between Canada and the Netherlands. The event was organized to highlight Canada's participation in the tournament and to promote women's participation in sports and youth empowerment in Qatar and Kuwait. Kuwait, in turn, hopes to have a full women's national team in the FIFA World Cup by 2031. In Finland, a group of Finnish Canadians created the annual charity tournament called Save Pond Hockey to contribute to fight against climate change. The Office of the President of Finland and the Canadian Embassy face off in this annual match as they promote hockey diplomacy. The National Hockey League has recently released a video highlighting the efforts of the Canadian High Commission in Islamabad to encourage young people, especially girls, to play hockey, to curl, and to pursue other winter sports in northern Pakistan. Ice hockey is also well known and popular in Ladakh, India, which I shall turn to our co-host to tell us more about. It gives me great pleasure to introduce to you Mr. Anshuman Gaur. Mr. Gaur is co-hosting tonight's event with us, and we've invited him to reflect on sport as unifier and to share his views and his experience as he, we found out, is an avid cricket player and has also played competitively. So we're looking forward to hearing about that as well. Mr. Gaur has a very distinguished bio. If anyone has had the chance to read our flyer that we sent out, he was born in Patna, India, and graduated with honors from Patna Science College in 1995. Mr. Gaur joined the Indian Foreign Service in 2001. He has since served in various capacities in the Indian embassies at Paris and Nepal, and with the permanent delegation of India to UNESCO, Paris. At headquarters, he has served on the Bhutan desk as officer on special duty in the External Publicity Division, and as director looking after Western European affairs. He also served as officer on special duty to the Vice President of India and as private secretary to the Law Minister of India. He speaks English, Hindi, and French. Mr. Gaur is married to Ms. Apurva Srivastava, presently the Consul General of India in Toronto. They have two daughters. An avid cricket enthusiast, Mr. Gaur was a featured writer for Word Weavers in 2017. His collection of poems, Isthmus of Time, was published in 2017. Without any further ado, I'd like to welcome Mr. Gaur to address the ICFC.
Thank you for the very generous introduction, Roohi. Good evening, everybody, fellow panelists, Richard, Stephen, Dr Szeto. It's a great honor to be here, to be jointly hosting this program today with the India-Canada Friendship Circle. When Roohi asked us to join in this event, especially because it had a cricket subtext, it was hard for me to say no. As she said, I'm merely a big enthusiast, having played and having administered cricket in various parts earlier. But it's such a pleasure to be joining you all today. I look forward to some great conversations around sport as a cultural unifier. We have been working with ICFC in the past, and under your leadership, Roohi, I must say the circle has done tremendously well. We are keen to do more events, more programs with you, and this is just the beginning. This year marks the 75th year of India's independence, and also the 75th year of India's establishment of diplomatic relations between India and Canada. So this is a special year for us. We are celebrating it in Canada, in India, across the world with a number of events, and we'll be doing a number of events in Canada as well. And I hope, they'll cover everything from intellectual activities to culture, hopefully also sport. And I invite all of you to join in them and enjoy them. India and Canada are natural partners, as my president recently wrote to the Governor General, congratulating her on taking office. Countries that share common values of democracy, plurality, and respect for rule of law. Our strong people-to-people relationship has propelled our collaboration in fields as diverse as science, commerce, tremendous investments bilaterally, and in education sector. We now have more than 200,000 students from India studying in Canadian higher education institutions. And we are very proud of the Indian origin community in Canada as it goes from strength to strength. It has integrated itself in the Canadian life and now is in tremendous leadership roles, providing dynamism to Canadian life. The movement of people, as Roohi alluded to, is something which seeds cultures and cultural traits across countries. And as people move, they bring their habits, they change in the new lands that they come to, but they also bring change to the land which they enter. And I use the example of sports as a metaphor, as a case of examination to look at these wonderful cultural transmutation and changes that happen and how these bind us together. I take the example of cricket, and I had promised that I would not be using PowerPoint, but I can't resist a couple of pictures. So Stephen, with your permission, if you can allow me to share my screen.
Yeah, you can.
I should get it. Yeah. So there you go. Can you see what we have?
Yep.
I'm sure
Yeah.
very few of you would be able to identify this gentleman in the Canadian jersey. Well, he is John Davison, arguably one of the greatest cricketers Canada has produced, the man who actually put Canadian cricket on international screen. And I just wanted to pitch this picture to show you that Canada is a cricket playing nation even today. And you have icons, even though many few in Canada would recognize it. Cricket was known in Canada in the 18th and even in the 16th century. We have record of matches being played. It came to Canada with the British, where apparently it grew. And again, with your permission, I have a couple of more slides that I want to share, Stephen. So,
Yep.
So please bear with me. So this is cricket in late 1700s in England. It says a match by Countess of Derby, the ladies playing there. This is cricket very recently. This is the new queen of cricket, Smriti Mandhana of India. And that's what I call poetry in motion. And this is Kamma Mirchandan. Again, many few of you would know. She's the captain of the Canadian cricket team, which is going to play in the T20 World Cup in 2020. So just to show you through those images how cricket has evolved and how strongly ladies are part of it, by the way. I mean, cricket seems to be dominated by male cricketers, but that's not the case actually. In Canada, we have record of the first cricket match, first international cricket match being played between a Canadian and a New York team. Perhaps the earliest international match we had. The old clubs in Canada all had cricket attached to them, although now they are only skating, curling, and golfing clubs. But some of the oldest clubs of cricket were in Canada. But towards the end of the 19th century, around 1890s, especially as ice hockey was discovered and became popular in Canada, perhaps because it identified, again, a cultural motive with the Canadian idea of the true north and a cold country, and perhaps they wanted to assert identity separate from the Britishers. Cricket somehow lost its popularity in Canada, was supplanted by games like ice hockey, basketball from mid-1930s, baseball, and also the American version of football. So while we were seeing this diminishment of cricket, so to speak, in Canada, cricket was finding its feet in India. The first match was played in 1790 when the British colonials first came to India. It took a while for cricket to find its feet, but soon the Indian princely states, the Indian upper class embraced that game, perhaps as a means of having some social bonding with their colonial masters. And perhaps the colonial masters encouraged it as a form of some sort of a social exchange. The British were adept at that. One of the reasons they avoided the guillotine was because the lords were playing cricket with their serfs, unlike the French. So by 1920s, the early 20th century, cricket was established in India, at least in the urban and the upper class circles, with games being played fairly regularly. But when India became independent, again to assert its independent identity, the game which was declared to be our national game was actually field hockey. So at least hockey is another thing which binds us together, Canadians and Indians. But since the 1970s, cricket has seen a strong resurgence in India, partly because the game moved from the upper classes and urban centers to the suburban and rural areas in India. From 1970, all the captains of the Indian cricket team have been firmly middle class, and that kind of allowed it to become a mass sport in India. The Indian victory at the World Cup in 1983 kind of opened the floodgates, and with the introduction of a shorter version of game, in form of a 20 over, which is a extended 90-minute inning game, cricket saw a kind of restructuring, the growth in popularity in the Indian subcontinent, which has been phenomenal. So phenomenal that the Marylebone Cricket Council and the International Cricket Council, which used to be headquartered in the Lord's Stadium in London, moved its headquarters to Dubai, just to be closer to where the mass of cricket was. Why the Indians took to cricket has had much debate on it. Reams have been written on it. James Astill calls it the Great Indian Tamasha. To Ramchandra Guha, one of our eminent contemporary historians, it's a corner of a foreign field. But to players and people and fans, enthusiasts like us, it's a game which gives us tremendous pleasure. We play it for fun, and we play it because we enjoy it. But we have seen a resurgence of cricket in Canada. Again, it would come as a bit of a surprise to most of my Canadian friends that cricket is the fastest growing sport in Canada, with almost 45,000 people playing cricket today. Even Ottawa had a cricket history, with Rideau Club hosting some of the top players of their time. But again, Ottawa is seeing a resurgence of cricket. There's a fully established Ottawa Valley Cricket Council, which conducts leagues right from young children to professional level tournaments. And this resurgence of cricket in Canada is essentially led by the immigrants, mostly from the Indian subcontinent, but also from places as diverse as Australia, South Africa, and the Caribbeans. I play for a grade 8 team in the Ottawa Cricket Council tournaments, and that team comprises of 6 people from the subcontinent, 2 people from Caribbean, and one on and off Australian. So this shows the kind of bringing back of cricket to Canada, a game which originated in England, in Britain, and was taken to India, and now has been brought back to Canada, which had a history of cricket, is how culture has transposed and moved cricket from one place to another. Now, like all forms of, and Roohi alluded to it in her speech, like all cultural and human interaction, cricket is not bereft of politics, and hence a a tool for diplomacy. So when the New Zealand team recently cancels its tour to Pakistan, it takes a call from Prime Minister Ardern to Prime Minister Khan to soothe the ruffled feathers. They've not been really soothed, but still they're trying, working at it. But any discussion of sports has to finally include what we call the magic of sports, in how it brings people together. When you're playing a sport, no matter what sport you're playing, whether cricket, whether it's hockey, or whether it's basketball, it does not matter who you are when you are part of a team. You can be a First Nation person, you can be a ethnic Indian, you can be a Caucasian, you can be a Hindu, Muslim, doesn't really matter. What matters is what you perform for the team. You unify as a team. And that, and I have a quote which I'd like to read out for you. It's actually from Nelson Mandela. And Mandela said, "Sports has the power to change the world. It has the power to inspire. It has the power to unite people in a way that little else does. It speaks to youth in a language they understand. Sports can create hope where there is only despair." Hope is what drives and inspires people. It brings people together. And nowhere is it as visible, as colorfully demonstrated as in the cricket fields of Canada today. And that amalgamation, that colorful future is perhaps what the beautiful country of Canada has in store for it as we move ahead. The team, the unity of a team cannot function unless everyone pulls together. Now, as a diplomat, that's a powerful lesson for me to learn. If that unifying power could be channelized to all the institutions and all the way we interact, just think of how different a world it would be to live in. So thank you again for listening to me with your time, being so patient, and I look forward to listening to my panelists.
Thank you, Mr. Gaur, for such a fascinating account of the history of cricket in Canada. And that's the purpose of ICFC. It's an educational forum, so we have a passion for learning in this group. And everyone always brings something new for us to ponder on. And thank you for sharing your reflections on your experience with cricket and also your experience as a diplomat. And we look forward to seeing you on the field. Maybe we'll bring a group out to come watch you play. So before I turn to the panel, I quickly wanted to give a chance to say hello to the audience. This is a friendship circle where we encourage people to make new friends, which was a lot easier when we met in person, but due to COVID, we're hosting these events virtually. But if there's anyone who wants to quickly say hello, if you're from out of town or if you know someone on the panel and if you want to say hello, we just invite you to say hello, who you are and what your interest is in sport. Stephen, maybe you can unmute everyone if anyone wants to jump in.
They'll have to do it for themselves.
Sure. Okay. I guess maybe.
Well, I could start. My name is Sandeep. My name is Sandeep Chopra. My father actually started one of the first field hockey clubs in Ottawa in 1974 because his Canadian-born sons did not want to go to the temple too much or go to Hindi school. So to find a way for us to interact and meet people. And at that time, of course, the immigration of Indians in the mid-70s exploded. Many very similar story with cricket. So I'll just, I'll fast forward to now. We're still doing that. We're 3 generations now into running a field hockey club. We are the largest junior field hockey club in Ontario. And within, I hope by Christmas time, we will be completing an announcement that will complete and announce that we are fully funded for a brand new field hockey facility built in the city of Ottawa on Colonnade Road. It's a $4 million project. It's in partnership with the city of Ottawa, the province of Ontario, and the federal government. So we hope that by Christmas time, we will also be in this situation. We have been taking, like you said, this is a long introduction. We have been doing exactly what you said, which is interacting with communities in Toronto and in Surrey and in all over the country, and bringing the local kids to meet those kids in those culturally based clubs. So I'll leave it there for now. I'm really interested to hear what the rest of the discussion will be.
Thank you, Sandeep. Thank you for
and
joining us.
Sandeep forgot to mention the fact that he's a neighbor of mine.
Oh, wonderful. Sandeep, it's wonderful to meet you. Thank you for joining us, and congratulations on your fantastic work, carrying on the work of your father onwards. Thank you for sharing that, and good luck.
Thank you. Thank you.
Is there anyone else, very quickly? Now's your chance. Is Rob Dawson by any chance on the line? We were going to surprise you, Richard, with that one. Okay, so let's turn. Hi, who is it?
Prakash.
Prakash?
Yes, I'm not too sure you're asking for questions or comments on the presentation at this time, but
Not yet.
but-
We just want people to say hello, and we'll be doing Q&A later after the panel. Okay. Thank you. That was Prakash. Was that Prakash Diar, our
Yes.
board member?
Yes.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Can I introduce myself?
Sure.
David Spence. I'm president of the Royal Commonwealth Society, Vancouver Island, and live as a neighbor to Victoria
Great.
and Brentwood Gardens.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Butcher shop.
Oh, wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining us. That's really wonderful. We appreciate, well, I'm going to assume you really enjoy sports and must have played maybe, and we look forward to hearing from you further. Okay, thank you, David, for joining us. Anyone else? All right, maybe we can turn to the panel, and then whoever wants to introduce themselves further can do so during the Q&A. And I'd like to take this opportunity now to introduce our moderator. And our moderator and I actually went to the same high school, and it's Cromby High School. If anyone has children going there, it was a great place for those of us who had that competitive spirit. It was a very good school that fostered excellence in sports. And that's where I got to hone my skills and play competitively in tennis and basketball and so forth, track and field. And Richard was a super athlete, and he went on to specialize further. If anyone has had a chance to read his CV, again, another very distinguished career. Mr. Richard Provencher is a well-traveled individual with over 15 years of progressive experience in writing and reporting with national and international organizations. Our moderator has spent time as a sports anchor for Global Television in Montreal, CTV Sportsnet in Toronto, and Rogers TV in Ottawa. He lists his most memorable beats, having covered the NBA, the NHL, and Canadian university sport. He also spent 2 years working as a public information officer for the United Nations Assistance Mission in Afghanistan, seeing firsthand the struggle and resilience of the Afghan people. Richard currently serves as head of media relations at Library and Archives Canada. In his spare time, he coaches his 10-year-old son competitive basketball team and teaches kickboxing. Once an athlete, always an athlete. And we've seen Richard play basketball, and he's fantastic. So I turn the floor over to you, Richard, and you'll have to tell us about some of the visuals in the background.
Hopefully, oh yes. Well,
Your background.
thank you so much for those kind words and the introduction, Roohi. You've put me on a pedestal, and I hope I can live up to them now. But actually, all kidding aside, when Roohi called me a few weeks back asking me to moderate tonight's topic, I never thought twice. This topic is very apropos in today's society. And matter of fact, just hearing from Mr. Gaur about his experiences, you know, I learned a thing or two. First of all, I didn't know that, you know, cricket was the fastest growing sport in Canada. Every year you seem to hear that phrase. I don't know if it's bragging rights for certain sports, but it's great to hear. I have to admit that growing up, I didn't know much about cricket until one year I was in Bermuda, and it was a big cricket festival that gathered people for days on end. It's almost a week-long festivity of games, and I got to know the game, and I found it to be extremely interesting. You have to be athletic, and much like baseball, you know, with the ball coming at hundreds of miles an hour, trying to hit it with a pad. Well, hats off to all cricket players. Tonight we will hear from two distinguished individuals. Dr. Courtney Szeto, an expert professor from Queen's University's Department of Kinesiology and Health Sciences. She'll be speaking on hockey and the South Asian community in Canada. And we will also hear from Dr. Steve Desjardins of the University of Ottawa and ICFC, and he'll offer personal reflections as a fan of both hockey and cricket and from experiences in both countries. But before we begin, Roohi asked me to reflect on my experience with sports as a unifying aspect of, as an athlete, as a current coach, as a mentor, and also a commentator. Personally speaking, sport has always played an integral role in my life. Whether as a young athlete on the hockey rinks growing up here in Ottawa, the basketball courts, the martial arts dojos, and even boxing rings well into my 50s. Sports to me is not just a builder of character, but helps build confidence. You learn invaluable life skills. It's about winning and also learning when you don't come out on top. I have a good friend of mine who's the president of the Soccer Association here in Ottawa, and he likes to refer not to it as losing, but a learned lesson. So you win, but when you don't win, you also learn many lessons. You also learn how to overcome obstacles, the determination to be the best, learning new skills, learning how to compete with others. Competition is good because, as we all know, life is full of many challenges, surprises, setbacks. And to me, sports is also a microcosm of life. You learned a lot just being on the field and overcoming, you know, some of these adversities that I mentioned. Now, sports as a cultural unifier, well, this brings me back to my youth as a youngster. I, like all the kids growing up in my neighborhood, you know, wanted to be like every Canadian hockey player, guys like Guy Lafleur, Bobby Orr, and Ken Drydens of the hockey world. Growing up, myself and my brothers, we were the only colored kids on our street and in some of these schools we attended. So even though I didn't have an issue making friends, there were times when we were made aware of, you know, our culture and our background. But playing sports, I found, was, in my estimate, the great equalizer. It didn't really matter about your race, your color, your background, as long as you played and you played well, and this was a unifying force pulling you together. And as Mr. Gaur mentioned, it's about bringing people together. So today I coach my 10-year-old son's competitive basketball team, as Roohi mentioned, where there's a broad spectrum of kids from all walks of life on a team of 12 individuals. We have Ethiopians, we have Bosnian kids, we have Jamaicans, we have Greek kids, we have someone from Congo, and also somebody from Haiti. So the part that I enjoy about coaching is seeing them on road trips when they gather in one of the coaches' rooms to play video games for hours on end. It's just seeing them bond together is something that is fascinating and just tells you about humanity itself. Professionally speaking, well, the game of basketball is one that I love, and it's brought me tremendous joy and some pleasant surprises as well. I spent time as a sportscaster realizing a lifelong dream to be on the national network, and this goes back to the late 80s, early 2000s, where I was able to cover the Toronto Raptors when they first made their inception in the NBA in the year 1998. And never in a million years did I think that I'd be able to interview such luminaries as Michael Jordan, Karl Malone, who was one of the best players on the Utah Jazz, and just seeing how it attracted so many people of different cultures to love this game. And the game of basketball also served me well when my career as a sportscaster ended. I was fortunate enough to work for the United Nations, where I served in Kabul of all places, and where my basketball background, this is going to sound strange, but helped me in the diplomatic milieu. I worked there as a communications officer for the mission, and having played basketball came in handy, as I was invited to the weekly games organized by the special representative of the Secretary General. So I got to play with colleagues from various parts of the world. And matter of fact, what united us was, the beautiful game of basketball. On another topic, being in the UN allowed me to participate in the UN Olympic Summer Games. So every year, the various missions got together and met in various countries to partake in the UN Olympic Games. So I was able to play basketball there well into my 40s. And so sport is a great unifier. Well, it's now time to introduce our distinguished individuals. First up will be Dr. Courtney Szto of Queen's University, who will speak on hockey and the South Asian community in Canada. Dr. Szto?
Thank you very much. Let me just pull up the slides here. Thank you very much for having me. And I'd like to acknowledge that I'm joining you from the land of the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe First Nations. Considering that we're gathered here to talk about sport, if you're not familiar with the Iroquois Nationals lacrosse team, I encourage you to do a little Google. They formed the lacrosse team as a political statement about Haudenosaunee land sovereignty. Now, I'll give you a little preface here that this presentation is not necessarily about the uniting aspect of sport, because that's just not necessarily where my research area is. As David pointed out in the chat, there can be separation issues as well, but I think it'll give us a lot to discuss about in the Q&A for sure. So I'm going to use this time to give you a brief overview of my doctoral research on South Asian experiences in Canadian hockey. And my research was premised upon two very prevalent Canadian myths. The first is that Canada values multiculturalism, and the second is that hockey is Canada. If these myths are true by themselves, then in theory they should be true together. But the more that you pull at these threads, the more the national fabric tends to unravel. When I started my PhD in 2013, the Hockey Night Punjabi broadcast was becoming increasingly popular. The NHL had launched its Hockey is for Everyone campaign 2 years earlier. This is the original poster here on the slide. And Vinay Vermani's film Breakaway was debuting at the Toronto International Film Festival. But we also saw news items about a Sikh hockey coach being banned from coaching if he chose to wear his turban instead of a helmet in British Columbia. So there were various other incidents of racism at the rink at the same time. The media portrayals of hockey didn't seem to match the news items, and there seemed to be an opportunity to highlight South Asian experiences in particular because of Hockey Night Punjabi and Breakaway. So the media productions became the entry point for my research project. I also grew up in North Delta, which, if you're not familiar, borders Surrey in Vancouver. So even though I am not South Asian, I grew up in a South Asian neighborhood, and it seemed like a good way to help tell the story of a community that I grew up in. I ended up interviewing 26 South Asian players, coaches, and parents in the Lower Mainland, as well as members of the Hockey Night Punjabi broadcast. This took about a year, and at the same time was conducting participant observation at hockey games and events such as Hometown Hockey and the Vancouver Vaisakhi Festival. So I'm going to give you the Coles Notes version of my research through my interpretation of spoken word narrative that I've created from interview quotes. So I use this to help give folks kind of a big overarching view of the data, but also to let the participants speak for themselves. I find that linking all the narratives together into one piece does a better job at expressing what it can feel like to be a South Asian hockey participant. I'll give you a warning that there is explicit and homo-negative language that is included in these narratives. So these are the voices of my research participants. I look at myself as Canadian more than anything else. It's tough though, because not everyone looks at you as Canadian. Where are you really from? Do you even know anything about hockey? You must mean field hockey, right? Even going to the rink is a barrier for some people. Forget lacing up skates or buying equipment, just going to the rink and being comfortable. Going to my brother's first practice with his elbow pads on the outside of his jersey, you chalk that up to having foreign parents. My dad always said, I always wanted to play hockey, but we had no money. Especially for him, me playing hockey was, we made it. I think being an East Indian player, I was an easier target. I was the only Indian. What do you mean you didn't get selected? You're leading the league in points. Parents coming up to me when I'm 11 or 12 telling me that's bullshit. There's always that hesitation. Was that a moment of prejudice? Oh, well, the brown guys stuck together. I really hate that term brown because it puts me in a spot where I am alone. You are throwing me in a category that I don't even belong in. What does that do for my sense of belonging? Where do I belong? You brown this, you brown that, brown bitch. Nice music, faggot Indian. Why don't you go back and play soccer with your elephants? I got called butter chicken once. I've totally been called the N-word before on the ice, like a lot, actually. It didn't bother me. They're just trying to get into my head. It didn't get to me. It actually fired me up. It didn't really bother me. It didn't bother me. I mean, it did bother me, you know, but I fought through it. When I heard some white kid make a comment about my parents, it would hurt so bad. I remember crying a few times. What the fuck is your problem? I would see my dad fighting in the stands over comments that were made. Experiences of racism are never really talked about because it's a deep, dark, twisted memory and it doesn't feel very good. Once other cultures start getting into sports in a big way, you watch the changes. There will be more and more racial tension because of jealousy. How did so-and-so make it? He's brown. He should be a taxi driver. If you have the resources to do something for your child and it's not available, you create your own opportunity. Does it look superficially bad on the surface? Yeah, of course it does. But if you think about it, that's capitalism at its best. They're doing their own thing because they feel they're not given a fair chance. It's something I've never been asked about. I guess it's something that is hard to do. Hard to survive in a sport where you are on your own. No one ever asked me if I was okay. People just assume. So I'll spend the rest of the time going through the major themes here. The first one being chirping or trash talking, chirping being the hockey nomenclature. When I asked players about their experiences with discrimination, they would often tell me a story, quickly followed up by some sort of disclaimer. They're just trying to get into your head as a way of downplaying the act and the harm itself. Or they would argue that these comments only came from the opposing team and not their own teammates. So there's this notion that racism spawning from the opposing team is somehow acceptable because they're the enemy, they're supposed to hold contempt for you. What is significant, though, is if racism is conceptualized by some participants as relational, and a label placed only upon those assumed to be part of one's in-group, such as their coach or their teammates, we have to consider how this definition greatly alters the presence of racism in hockey. In the second quote on the slide here from Amit, it took her a lot of reflection to remember that, that she had been called the N-word on the ice, like a lot, she says. And even then, it was not marked as an example of racism. This should make us wonder, if young hockey players do not think that being called the N-word is racism, what then is racism? Now, if you search Chirping 101 guides on the internet, and they do exist out there, you'll find a variety of tips of how to trash talk somebody, including talking about their skill and their age, their equipment, but none appear to champion racist slurs as the overall strategy. So if there's an unwritten rule that chirping stops short of racism, why do these players willingly give the benefit of the doubt when it came to racist comments on the ice? In my observation, it seems that they learn it from their coaches, the media, and their parents, who tell them they're just trying to get in your head. We tell our kids that there will always be stupid people out there, but you have to rise above it. Rarely then do we end up punishing the perpetrator or condemning the racism. Unfortunately, what this does is teach players that racism is inevitable and that skill development is their best solution to dealing with it. This is the classic Mighty Ducks, Remember the Titans kind of ideology, that the better you get, the less racism you will face because skill equals respect. Unfortunately, the truth is that of the players that I spoke with, the more goals they scored, the better they played, the more racism they received, and the more violent it became. Which leads into the next theme of working through racism as opposed to challenging it head on. So the image here is of Sudarshan Maharaj, the goaltending coach for the Anaheim Ducks. And in this quote, he's kind of reproducing this idea that, yeah, racism is part of sports and we just have to accept it. There will be things that are completely unfair and you have to kind of work through it. You'll do fine. So in another quote from Billy, who's an elite player on the bottom, not on the slide here, he talks about they're not going to take the minority over the other kid because it's just the way it is with anything. I believe that, and not in a bad way, but I think that's just how it is. I think that's why it's difficult for some of us to get to the next point, but that just means we have to work twice as hard, and that's up to us to do. Previous research has documented the desire for racialized people to work harder for the same opportunities as a response to discrimination. Work ethic, then, is not so much a cultural trait as it is a means of survival. Still, if resilience requires hardship as an instigator, we need to ask ourselves which groups get to be resilient, or perhaps more accurately, which groups have to be resilient in order to be equal. It's also important that we differentiate between hard work with the goal of excellence versus hard work to receive equal opportunities. Hard work is essential for any athlete who wants to be successful, but we're talking about hard work with the intent of avoiding dismissal. We are creating resilient athletes, and not in the sense of adaptability, but as docile citizens. In the words of Julian Reed, the resilient subject is a subject which must permanently struggle to accommodate itself to the world. Or as Sarah Ahmed has argued, resilience is a form of governance to teach citizens how much injustice they can bear. And if someone does snap under this pressure, we then mark that person as the violence and not the pressure that caused the snap. Understandably, this is a survival mechanism to tell children that they can work through any obstacles, but we're also inadvertently maintaining racist systems and enabling racist people to stay in those systems. The implication of privileging racialized resistance is not that we end up with really strong citizens who can handle anything. Rather, it's that we end up with strong and docile citizens who have been taught that changing themselves instead of the system is the best way to survive and thrive. The third theme I'll touch on is the idea of integration and who really becomes integrated into what. And this was alluded to earlier. Almost all of my research participants were born in Canada, which means that there is nothing to integrate. They are Canadian, full stop. But their racialized bodies are often lumped in with new immigrants. And their white teammates, on the other hand, are the ones who arguably have something to learn about an increasingly globalized Canadian society. They are the ones who gain something from being in the locker room with racialized teammates. It is the white teammates who would ask their South Asian friends about food, language, and culture. And we often forget that white people can be immigrants themselves. And those teammates often had many questions. One player, Shane, explained, quote, some players, they're from a different culture too. They're not always Canadians, maybe from Europe. Those players tend to be more interested in learning about our culture, end quote. So it is through their South Asian teammates that white Canadians learn that there is more than one kind of Indian. Former Prime Minister Stephen Harper told Sports Illustrated, quote, "One of the first things you see is immigrants start to belong to Canadian society when their kids start to come to the hockey rink. Then the parents start to integrate with the other parents. So it's a great common denominator," end quote. They integrate, and so do their kids. In other words, Canada and its people may change, but hockey does not. When we speak of integration and assimilation, we often envision the margins being folded or incorporated into the center, but that difference becomes diluted when added to the core. But I contend that the language of integration and assimilation hides the fact that change must occur at the core, the center, or the mainstream of society. Integration is a two-way street, if not more, as opposed to a unidirectional movement towards whiteness. If hockey is Canada, then as Canada changes, so too must hockey. So the last theme I'll discuss is the growth of ethnically specific sporting spaces. Due to the marginalization of many BIPOC players in mainstream hockey programs, initiatives like the Black Girl Hockey Club and Apna Hockey are becoming more and more prevalent. Apna Hockey was created by Lali Tour in 2017, and this is Lali on the slide, hanging out with Hayley Wickenheiser. It started in Edmonton. It has now since branched to Calgary, Toronto, and Vancouver. And just last week, Apna Hockey announced that it is now an official partner with the Edmonton Oilers to run their first shift program, which is an introductory hockey program for kids. Lali created the thing that he needed when he was a child with the advent of social media. South Asians no longer have to feel like they're the only ones in the same way that their predecessors did. Alicia Baines and I have argued that what makes Apna Hockey possible in large part is social media. Today, opportunities for historically marginalized folks to connect around the world has never been greater. Hockey often gets hit the hardest with criticism because of its obvious whiteness and prohibitive costs. But these types of groups have exploded in every sporting space. It doesn't matter what sport, how much it costs, what the culture is like. These ethnically segregated spaces or specific spaces, such as the Brotherhood of Skiing, Latino Outdoors, Brown Girls Climb, Black Girls Run, they exist in every sport. So it's not just a hockey problem. The pattern of development tells us that it's not about cost or geographic accessibility alone. We have yet to deal with white supremacy in sports, and this generation has decided that creating BIPOC exclusive spaces is one way that they can enjoy their activity of choice and try to change the landscape for future generations. These organizations enable BIPOC participants to see themselves and share experiences. It allows media makers to challenge dominant stereotypes about racialized citizens. Every image that Apna Hockey posts on its Instagram account represents a visual counter-narrative with respect to how hockey is produced and consumed in Canadian culture. These images tell a more comprehensive story about hockey in Canada and demonstrate an exercise in cultural citizenship where marginalized groups can write themselves into the national narrative. In an interview with Lali Tour, he explained to me that he uses Instagram to, quote, shed light on players that work their butts off and play at a high level. They should get recognition. They should understand what they mean to our community, end quote. He continued with a reflection about what this type of media amplification would have meant to him in his younger days. He said, I don't know what I meant to my community because I didn't know that I had a community. That's just how disconnected I was. Through initiatives such as Black Girl Hockey Club and Apna Hockey, today's youth are given permission to be proud of their identity because space has been created for them to claim as their own. And this is just a quick image of Dampi Gaur, who is the other co-founder of Apna, and this is the Indian women's national ice hockey team. Hayley Wickenheiser and Lali worked together to bring the team over from Ladakh, and so they hung out and played some games in Vancouver and in Calgary. So I'll end it there to give us enough time for Q&A, but thank you for giving me the opportunity to share some of my research. If you're interested in learning more, my book is available through UBC Press in Canada, and the co-authored policy paper on anti-racism in hockey is also available as a free PDF download from Hockey and Society. So if you just Google the policy paper, anti-racism hockey, you should be able to find some links that'll lead you there. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Szeto. Fascinating stuff. Our second distinguished individual is Dr. Steve Desjardins of the University of Ottawa and ICFC, as he will offer personal reflections as a fan of both hockey and cricket and from experiences in both countries. Steve?
Okay, thank you, Richard. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do that. I'm going to bring up my presentation. Okay, so what I wanted to do was say a few things from the point of view of a fan of many sports, but in particular when thinking about this idea of sport as a cultural unifier. My own personal experiences, both here in Canada and in India, made it clear. Well, let's focus in on two, right? In Canada, it's hockey. In India, it's cricket. And we have this thing that hockey is Canada's game, right? And I'm asking the same question. Canada equals hockey. Is this is a legitimate question that we keep asking ourselves, right? Many people have said that hockey is actually proof of a distinct Canadian culture, right? Something that came out of being distinct both from Britain and the United States. Right, there's more than 600,000 people participating in hockey programs all across the country, right? The majority of NHL players are still Canadians, right? They outnumber American players 2-1, yet the populations, Americans outnumber Canadians 10-1. And I have to sort of add my personal experience here because, yes, I am a Canadian, descended from people who have been in Canada for a very long time. Actually North America for a very long time on both sides of my family. And yet I spent the first 8 years of my life living in the United Kingdom, the United States. And it was only as an 8-year-old that I came home to Canada. And one of the first things that really caught me was the prevalence of hockey. It was hockey, 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 hockey. Everywhere, all the time. And so, personally, that's, this is one of the things that struck me about Canada, coming in, sort of as an outsider. Hockey's everywhere. Hockey is everything. Right. These pictures are just, a handful of pictures that, people know. People know, what's going on here. People know who these guys are, right? People know what is being referred to in this newspaper article. And people know who that guy is and what just happened, right? And there are many other images. You could have the image of, Bobby Orr flying through, the air, horizontally. You have, the image of Jacques Plante wearing the mask, all kinds of things. People know these images. Where does this come from? And I think ultimately what it is it's this idea that, in the late 19th century, there was a desire in Canada to assert an identity that is Canadian and to move away from, you know, British norms, right? And, you know, Mr. Gaur, hit on this exactly. This idea that, you know, hockey became an expression of being Canadian because this is a game that we play. Right now, you get into arguments about, of course, where was it first played, whether it was in Kingston or whether it was in Montreal or whether it's in Nova Scotia, right? That doesn't really matter. The point is that, you know, as you move from the late 19th century into the early 20th century, hockey is everywhere, right? Everywhere. And, you know, this is so cultural, right? You can see things like this everywhere, you know, posters, statements like these, you know, on bumper stickers, on T-shirts, right? And you don't think twice about it, right? Because these kinds of sentiments, you know, they're natural here. You know, we even have, you know, a chain of stores, you know, Hockey Life, right? You know, that sell, you know, hockey equipment, right? You know, they're everywhere, right? You know, you Google Hockey Life and you can see images, you know, for, you know, their stores all across the country, you know. But why is this so? Because it's everywhere. It's literally everywhere. And what does it mean to people? Well, to people, you know, it means all kinds of things. It's that experience playing it, you know, for fun as a kid, on the road during the summer, right? On the ice rink during the winter, right? Perhaps, you know, you played for your school team, right? Perhaps, you know, you played, you know, in an organized league, right? It's the memories of, you know, sitting down on Saturday night with your dad, watching Hockey Night in Canada, right? That's a normal experience for many people, you know, memories, you know, from their childhood, you know, that they carried on through their life, you know, and continued on with their own children. You know, these are things that I've seen, right? As I said, you know, as sort of an outsider coming to Canada myself, you know, which is, you know, strange because it is, you know, it is my land, so to speak, my country. But as an outsider, it's one of the first things that struck me, right? When I made friends and started spending time with them, what did they do on Saturday night? They watched Hockey Night in Canada with their dads, right? Like all of them. Right? We have this idea that hockey is everywhere and for everyone. Okay, well, you know, as Dr. Szeto, you know, was speaking about just a few minutes ago, that's not without its issues, right? Certainly not without its issues. But at the same time, what do you see, right? You see a desire, right, to play the game, right, amongst all kinds of people everywhere. And what I think that is an expression of a recognition of the fact that, okay, hockey is part of Canadian identity. And so this is an activity that anyone who lives here can participate in and enjoy. Again, not without, you know, not without issues, obviously. But I think that's, you know, the initial invitation, that this is an activity that is prevalent here and people see that and want to participate, right? Because they enjoy the sport, they enjoy the camaraderie, they enjoy playing up with their teammates, you know, getting the exercise, being out in the fresh air if they're outdoors, all those things. And this is, you know, a specifically Canadian thing to do. Okay, what about India? Well, if you think, you know, hockey is everywhere in Canada and prevalent in Canada. Well, in India, it's cricket, right? Cricket is now the world's second most popular sport. right? Everybody knows, of course, soccer is the world's most popular sport. Everybody knows that. If you ask people what the world's second most popular sport is, in North America, you're likely to get the wrong answer. You will get the right answer from people who know just how big cricket is in India, right? It's because of India that cricket is the second, world's second most popular sport. And in fact, it's because of India that the cricket is a game that is being played all around the world now in many kinds of competition. Because honestly, if it wasn't for India, you'd have the English, you'd have the Australians, you'd have the South Africans, you'd have the West Indians and New Zealanders, and they'd be playing each other in test matches, and you'd have county cricket in England, and that would be probably about it, right? Without the popularity of the game that has really just thrived in the last 50 years because of India, you wouldn't have the IPL, you wouldn't have the T20 World Cup, you wouldn't have you wouldn't even have the 100 competition now, right? Things like that, they never would have happened, right? Mr. Gaur is also mentioning, of course, star players, captains of the team, and I've got three of the most recent ones there. I also have, of course, the women's national team up there from in the corner, but right in India, right, like this fellow, and that fellow are household names, right? Everybody knows who they are, right? Everybody knows who they are, and everybody knows, the wonderful thing that he did in the game, against whoever, whenever, right? It's the same way, for example, here in Canada, people know who Wayne Gretzky is, people know who Guy Lafleur is, people know, Rocket Richard, people know, you name it, any of the stars of hockey, and people remember, oh, that goal that he scored in that game. Well, it's the same thing with with cricket in India, right? People know these names, these faces. And the truth is, like in the same way that, hockey is so prevalent in Canada, where you'll see, literally you go out in any any neighborhood, suburban neighborhood, and you'll see kids playing it on the street in the summertime. You'll see playing it in the outdoor rink in the wintertime. The same thing is true in India. You will see kids playing cricket everywhere, absolutely everywhere. Right. And I found some images, showing boys playing cricket, from all over India. Right up here in the north, here near the Taj Mahal, city streets, using the traffic signs themselves. I guess I think they're parking signs, as the wickets. Right. You also have, for example, here's the beach in Mumbai. Right, but you'll see this everywhere, and this is part of my experience in India. The first time I went to India, we got in Mumbai about midnight on Saturday night. We got back to my wife's cousin's apartment about 1 o'clock in the morning. We got to bed probably about 1:30 or 2. And then I was woken up about 6:30 by the sound of kids out on the street playing cricket. 6:30 on Sunday morning. As soon as there was enough light to see, they were out there playing. The other thing that was happening at this time is India, the national team of India was on a tour of, I believe it was Australia. And the matches were on TV everywhere. People were watching them everywhere. And, even my wife's uncles, they were glued to the TV sets, watching the games, watching what was happening. But the truth is, yeah, the game is everywhere. And this has been my experience, The last time we were in India, same thing. Everywhere we went, there were boys playing cricket, with varying degrees of equipment and setups, right? Everything from, groups of boys that have proper bats and proper stumps to use for the wickets and proper balls, all the way down to, boys doing things like this, using sticks for the bats and wickets, and using, a tennis ball or whatever ball they could find. And this, again, this was everywhere, right? Everywhere you look, in any park, right? Any, side street, any area where there was enough room. And it's surprising how, little room that, they would take, to play in, but anywhere they could play, they would play. And that would be everywhere. And so why is that? Why does sport bring us together, right? Especially if we think of games like hockey in Canada, cricket in India, right? Why did, for example, my grandfather's love of the game and, being at the Odd on Bank Street in the 1920s and 1930s, watching the original Senators translate into his English son-in-law in the 50s, becoming a massive hockey fan, right? In spending time with his father-in-law, my grandfather, right? How did that happen? Because it's the fabric. It's the fabric of, what happens here. Right? How, in India does, a game which, was, the colonial masters game, suddenly become the sport of choice. Well, not suddenly, but I mean, become the sport of choice, 100 years later, right? How does that happen? Well, I think it happens because fundamentally, people enjoy the games. People enjoy the games and they find something in them to bring them together, in a sense of community and sharing something. And I think that's, what hockey in Canada has done, what cricket in India has done, soccer in England and other countries. What, baseball originally was doing in the United States, but it's now football. It's the shared love of something, whether it's participating in it or just watching it, that brings the people together. Okay, well, that's just a fan's perspective. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Desjardins. The comparisons were great. The images were fantastic. It reminds me of the picture you showed of the kids playing cricket on a beach with whatever they found. Reminds me of myself as a youngster. If you couldn't afford to have a goal while you're playing street hockey, what did you do? The goalposts were either your boots or snow piles or your gloves or your hockey sticks. So it's nice use of the images for your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
It is now time to bring in, well, before we get to the Q&As, we're going to invite Dr. Nalin Bhargava he's a former president of the Ottawa Dental Society and a former president of the Ottawa Girls Hockey Association. For 10 years, he coached girls' competitive hockey teams culminating in a provincial gold medal in 2014. He's also a team dentist for the Ottawa 67s and the Ottawa Red Blacks, and currently sits on the Ottawa Sports and Entertainment Group. That's OSEG, their charitable foundation. So Dr. Bharghava, the floor is yours. Is he there?
Stephen,
There, can you hear me?
Ah, here we go.
yeah, Stephen, if you can turn it over to Nalin, thanks.
All right. Well, thank you, Richard, and greetings to President Ahmed and Deputy High Commissioner Gaur. I'll be really quick here. The topic of today is sports as a cultural unifier. And if I could, I'd like to just share with you one really special night that occurred in 2020 amongst 4 groups that we unified. So one is there's an association here in Canada called the Canadian Association of Students from India, which, as Mr. Gaur was talking about, compromises some of those 200,000 students from India who are studying in Canada. And after meeting with them, one of the things that they wanted was social integration, meaning how can we become more Canadian? Second group is Invest Ottawa. Their job is to encourage investment in the city of Ottawa. One of their problems here is there's a shortage of high-tech talent here in the city. And ironically, a lot of Indian students who come to Ottawa are studying just that. They're in the high-tech world. Group number 3, the High Commissioner, and at that time, the acting High Commissioner was Mr. Gaur, and they were sort of the caretaker because these students are Indian citizens, and who's looking after them when they're here in Canada? And the 4th group was the Ottawa 67s and OSEG, who run the different sports teams in here in Ottawa. They always had a desire to become more diverse. So 4 groups, 4 wants, and this led to India Day at an Ottawa 67s game. So Stephen, can I just share my screen?
Yes, you can.
And I will just show you the result of that evening. Okay.
And you may have to turn the volume up on your end, Nalin.
Night in Canada,
Okay.
Punjabi. This week, for the first time, the OHL's Ottawa 67s hosted an India Day match where they ended up winning more than just 2 points. Hockey fans packed TD Arena in Ottawa where celebrations took place on and off the ice.
Yeah, every goal you're going to hear this drum go off for the 67s. So I hope, there's going to be a lot of goals tonight. There's going to be that many more opportunities to get the energy in the crowd hyped up.
The Ottawa 67s organization held a India Day match where many visitors got their first glimpse of a hockey game.
So we're looking at how we bring folks that might not come to Ottawa 67s games, might not come to TD Place in their normal life, growing the sport, and hopefully doing some good in terms of our community, in terms of keeping skilled workers in Ottawa.
I think it's awesome the way players play with the energy. I think it's brilliant. Yeah, it's awesome. Like, it is my first experience here to watch the ice hockey game, and it's so awesome. And the networking even also awesome. So it is a nice Friday.
For attendees, it was a way to connect not only with Canada's game, but their community as well.
It's one of the most brilliant thing we can do with the Indo-Canadian community here. The Bollywood culture, which brings India together like nothing else, and hockey, which is the lifeblood of Canada. And we bring the two together, have a great night, have fun. That's the idea.
Before coming to this game, I never imagined that it would be so fast. But yeah, it's amazing. This is my first experience. I'm really enjoying, and I feel like coming back again.
The night celebrated South Asian culture with the game being broadcasted in Punjabi as well. It was a match where the 67s didn't just take home 2 points, they also won over New fans.
So that was Hockey Day, the 67s game. And I have a special guest here too that I'd like to introduce. India, Canada, French Circle, and I just want to introduce one of my longtime friends, who also happens to be the executive director of the OSEG Foundation, Janice Baressi, and I believe she's here today. So I wonder, Janice, if you could just tell the audience here who exactly is OSEG and what does the OSEG Foundation do, and maybe a special comment about Ranveer Gill. So
yeah, for sure. Thank you, Nalin. That video is really exciting. It was one of the most exciting nights, 67s, and hope we can do it again. Just really quickly, in terms of the Ottawa Sports and Entertainment Group, we do run the OHL Team 67s, as you just saw. And then in 2008, we brought back the CFL to Ottawa, and our football team is the Red Blacks. I'm the executive director of the charitable arm, the OSEG Foundation, who uses sport as an inclusive means of helping children and youth to improve their health, to develop physical activities, to develop social, educational, and leadership skills, and of course, to play and have fun. And in our pursuit to help Ottawa's children and youth reach their fullest potential, we adopt a sport for development approach, and our programs are based on the belief that sport participation provides a fertile ground for children and youth to develop critical life skills and abilities and attitudes that have considerable value later on in life. We know that when youth are engaged in sport, their life outcomes are more positive and bright. They have increased graduation rates, higher wages, greater self-confidence, their emotional health and well-being, all much more positive. But however, the reality, and as we've talked about some this evening, is that disparities in access to sport and associated health outcomes are magnified by race, culture, income, gender, place where you're born. And ultimately, our goal is to reduce those inequities and offer programs that can break down barriers for those youth populations. And so we run gender-specific programs, Girls on the Run. We run very culturally specific and engaging and break down those barriers. And so that's some of what we do, and I'm pleased to share that with you today, and really look forward to this discussion.
And Ranveer Gill.
Oh, sorry. And Ranveer, he's just such a fantastic addition to the 67s. He joined our team just, I think the first year was, I think his first game might have been India night. He's an integral part. He's been working with young people. He's been helping us break down barriers in hockey. He's a fantastic player on the 67s team, but more importantly, in terms of breaking down those barriers and getting involved in the foundation, engaging and creating more diversity in sport. He's a champion. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Richard.
Well, that's really wonderful, Nalin. And thank you. Actually, the video you showed us, the India Day match, very relevant to our lecture today in terms of diversity in sport. And it was so interesting, as you mentioned, Indian tech students being brought and being introduced to the Ottawa 67s. And ice hockey, that's I guess hockey, what you call hockey diplomacy. So very well done. And we want to thank you for bringing your guest, Janice Baressi. Thank you for joining us. And this is the India-Canada Friendship Circle. So we hope that we may see you in future events, and we'd love to talk to you and see how we may be able to help support some of your diversity initiatives. And I think that would be, this is a good time to introduce an actual young female who was born and raised in Canada, but of South Asian origin, and has played hockey for 25 years. So she is a youth, at least I still can consider her in the youth category. And I think, she's someone who actually would fit under one of your types of initiatives, Janice. And so let's hear from Zeena. I would like to invite Zeena just to share, some of her thoughts on what she's heard so far. And but before we, and I've also invited Zeena to kick off the Q&A with a question. But before we open the Q&A, I also want to follow the custom which Dr Szeto opened with and reminded us of, and thank you for that. We from the ICFC also respectfully acknowledge that the lands on which we are gathered are part of the traditional unceded territory of the Anishinaabe people. So thank you again, for, Janice and Zeena Rashid. She actually studied at the University of Ottawa in health sciences, where she has an undergraduate degree. And then she went on to do her master's in management and innovation at the University of Toronto. And then she came back to Ottawa and did her second undergraduate degree in electrical engineering at Carleton University. She also ran varsity, cross country, and track and field for the University of Ottawa and Carleton U. And she also trained with the team at University of Toronto, but didn't compete with them, given her very busy work schedule and her studies. But she did keep up her hockey. And in fact, when I called her yesterday, she was heading off to a hockey game last night. So she continued to play hockey through university. She's played for 25 years. I've seen her come back from practice when, I've heard about her running as well. So Zeena, we'd love to hear from you on, what you've heard from Dr. Szeto's presentation, your own experience. And if you have any questions for the panel, that would be great.
That introduction. So I guess for just to kind of
Stephen, can we put the change the screen to Zeena, please?
She needs to put her camera on.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm kind of in a dark room, but
oh, that's
okay, I guess it's not that dark. Anyway, so basically I guess my experience with hockey has been for the most part pretty positive. I mean, so it kind of I did, I'm not sure if it might have been because I might have been sheltered to whatever was going on, because my dad was also my coach for most of my years playing. But for the most part, when I did try out a couple of times for the competitive team and didn't make it, but I was also really small. And then I got bigger and I did make it. So I feel for the most part, I kind of, I did feel like my experience playing hockey was pretty fair. And I don't know if maybe that's just me playing in Ottawa versus
you're on the
some of the people that Dr. Szeto you had interviewed in BC. So I also noticed that there's equipment that's hanging out behind you. And so this question, directed towards Dr. Szeto. I was just kind of wondering what your experience has been playing hockey, if that equipment's yours, if not.
Yeah, thanks for that, Zeena. Yes, that is my equipment, used as recently as last night. So yeah, my experience is similar to yours. They've been overwhelmingly positive, which is kind of, I think, what helps me actually do the work. And there are definitely people like Julie Chu who, have had very positive experiences, and Julie herself has said, had she had a bad experience, she probably would have quit hockey at that point. So she was just very fortunate to have good coaches and good teammates. So I think the more that I've done this research, what I've realized is that when people have positive experiences in the game, it is by chance. and not by design. And so the purpose of the work really is to make sure that we're designing sport so that it's getting as many positive experiences and all those benefits that we want as much as possible, and not leaving it up to chance, right? We have so many stories about abusive coaches and things like that. Like those things we can weed out of the system and they will make a big difference. So yeah, I think that's great that you've had a positive run through hockey. But yeah, what kills me is when people don't, and they leave the rink having had a bad experience and maybe they don't come back. So those are the things that kind of keep me going and trying to figure out how we can make sure that as many people have a positive experience as possible.
Okay, thank you very much, Zeena, for that question and for kicking off the Q&A. So the floor is open to anybody who wishes to ask a question. I'm not sure how this works. Do people speak at once? There's no raising hands here, so Roohi, you may have to help me.
What we generally do is people are free to unmute themselves and ask questions, or if they wish, type questions in the chat, and we can respond to those as well.
Okay.
Hi, I'd like to ask a question or make a comment anyways. This is Sandeep. What a interesting conversation today from everybody. I just want to particularly point out, Courtney's research, which frankly mirrors exactly what my experience has been, not just in hockey playing, but also when I returned to be a coach and a trainer for my own kids. And it has driven forward our commitment to change this narrative. And I just wanted to point out, like, our decision that we have made with our programming and with the new Field Hockey Center is that, to decide what business we're really in. Are we in the sports business? We don't believe so. We are in the community health business. We are here to make communities stronger and healthier, and to build the fabric between communities, and to seek out like-minded communities who are looking to do the same thing. I truly believe that after 45 years of involvement in sport as a volunteer and done virtually every job there is in sport, none of them at the professional level, that, the corporatization of children's sports in Canada is a very big problem. And you're seeing now the disinterest from kids. They're dropping out of sports earlier than they did before. And my question kind of to Courtney was that, do you feel that this proliferation of culturally based, and those things are very, very clear in our sport as well, the proliferation of sort of culturally based sporting entities, I'll call them, is a trend that can be somehow or should be somehow turned around, or somehow, and I don't mean discouraged, but in your research, do you think there's a way that we can change the focus of those things to bring them into exactly what I was trying to say, which is sort of community health and building things together? Or do you believe that it's sort of a path that is now inevitable?
Good question. So I think that organizations such as Apna Hockey and Black Girl Hockey Club would argue that they are in the same vein as you about community health and building community within the hockey space. So Apna Hockey, when it first was created, I think Lally thought it was a way to mine for South Asian talent and get increasingly more South Asian talent to the NHL level. The more that he's done this, so when he started it, it was a private organization. It is now moving into a nonprofit organization because he realizes that to be truly Apna Hockey, it needs to be by the community for the community. So it's taken that kind of like high level elite development, not necessarily fully off the page, but it is definitely not the top priority at this point. And it is about mentorship and connecting youth with other like-minded folks in the community, and connecting internationally athletes to sponsorship opportunities and things like that. So part business platform, part community organization. And if we look at an organization like Black Girl Hockey Club, I'm on the advisory council for them, and they're constantly saying no to NHL teams that want to do business with them, but because they realize that they want Black Girl Hockey Club to be used as a shield for any kind of negative press that they receive. So it is very community first and youth development first. It's not about getting players to the elite levels. It's about getting people to enjoy the game and to have, you know, beneficial experiences in it. So I think that you're actually very aligned with some of them. And I think that things also change as you kind of start doing the work itself, right? Like you come in with a particular experience and that's what you're trying to create. And then you realize that there are different niches that need your help and your resources, and your skills go somewhere else. So yeah, I think it's always kind of changing to whatever the landscape needs. And I think right now it is space created for people to kind of have that experience that maybe was not stereotypical in previous generations. And hopefully when we deal with the racism and sexism in the games themselves, then we don't need these kinds of ethnically segregated sporting groups by themselves anymore. That is the hope, but I think we'll just have to kind of keep an eye on it.
Great. Any more questions? Another question?
Thanks.
Sure. Can I go?
Yeah, go ahead.
Sure. Yeah, David Kilgour, Namaste, Sasri Kal, and Assalamu Alaikum. I want to thank all of you for what you've said. I grew up in Winnipeg and played hockey from about the age of, before I could practically walk, and then a bit of cricket. And what Dr Szeto said is just, oh, I'm just staggered to hear her say that. And she's already made comments, but if there's anything else you can say on what we can do to stop that racism and so on, I wish you'd tell us. I'm just devastated by what you said. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think people often ask me as if I have some silver bullet. The reality is that the solution to racism, homophobia, misogyny are all quite similar. Increased representation, better resource funding, challenging people in interpersonal relationships, and having better oversight of all of these organizations, having accountability and having a place for people to go with their complaints. So I think that those kinds of mechanisms are quite similar across the board. I think one of the huge issues that hockey needs to deal with in particular is the development of hockey academies. And as Sandeep was saying, like the proliferation of the pay-to-play system is huge. And I don't like to confuse class issues with race issues, but this is one that is extremely intertwined. The way to elite level hockey in Canada is through private academies that can cost anywhere from $10,000 to $30,000 per season. The Timbits hockey that we see that is very diverse and that represents Canada quite well is not the hockey that makes it up to the national levels for either men or women. So I don't really know what's going to happen with the exorbitant costs of this, but we've seen it in baseball and soccer as well. These traveling teams are just the way to go. I kind of feel like the bubble has to burst at some point. But if we can publicly subsidize more opportunities for like hockey in schools, but also I think this goes to the idea that ice hockey cannot be the only kind of hockey that we play. And ball hockey has been mentioned as well, and field hockey. There has to be opportunities to play roller hockey and ball hockey and understand that that is also part of Canadian culture as much as ice hockey is. So it is very limiting to think that ice hockey is the only thing that matters. And when we say that it matters, I would also argue that only men's hockey matters in Canada, because it is hard pressed for my students to name any women on the National Olympic team, regardless of how many Olympic medals they have. And these are kinesiology students. They are supposed to live and breathe this stuff. So where is the women's professional league? Where are the women's opportunities? Where is the women's televised games in between 4-year Olympic cycle. So yeah, there's a lot that hockey needs to work on for sure.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
I have another question, unless someone else wants to go first, and this time for Mr. Gaur, if we could ask. Sorry, if someone else wants to go, that's fine.
This is Prakash. I'd just like to make a very general comment, if I may. I think, Richard, you rightly pointed out that sports is a microcosm of life and of society. And I was born and raised in South Africa. And I think some of us here in Canada are very polite. I think we have to address the discrimination and the systemic problems that does in fact exist in Canada, that is now being admitted from the Prime Minister level down. And I think that's that there's a lot of work for us all to do, whether it be in sport or outside sport. And having grown up in South Africa, which was under the apartheid system, where one was discriminated against purely because of your skin color, and 90% of us were non-white, racialized, and only 10% of the white population had the right to vote until 1994, when Mandela became the first democratic elected president. And so growing up in South Africa in sports, and you must remember that because of its, South Africa became a pariah state internationally. They were kicked out of the Commonwealth of Nations. They were kicked out of the Olympics. They were kicked up of the Soccer FIFA Federation, and every international sports, they were kicked out. And so we had a saying in South Africa, no normal sport in an abnormal society, because our society was very abnormal. And therefore, there was an active boycott of sporting contact with South Africans, economic, cultural, academic. And so until, and that only changed in 1995, where in 1994, Mandela became the president, and it was only because of him. And I don't know if some of you watched a movie called Invictus, where it dealt with the movie of Rugby World Cup in 1995, which was just a year after the democratic elections. And I think it took a person like Mandela to really bring the nation together through sport. And I think it was only because of Mandela who could do that, because 90% of us could still not cheer the South African team, you know, because it was mainly a white team. You know, we were opposed to that. And I just want to mention one more thing. Talking about cricket, there's an interesting story, and I don't know if some of you know a name called Basil de Oliveira. Basil de Oliveira was a colored, so-called colored in South Africa, brilliant cricketer, couldn't make it, of course, because of his race. He was sponsored to leave and go to England, and he made the England team. And the English cricket team was going to be visiting South Africa with Basil de Oliveira, playing for England against South Africa. And the Prime Minister at the time objected to that, and the tour was cancelled, simply because he was going to be a colored guy on the English team, you know. So all this just to fast forward to say, you know, sports cannot really be divorced or separated completely from the society in which we live. So we have a lot of work both in sport and outside of sport.
Thank you very much, Prakash. Well said. Yeah, and I remember the moment you're referring to, and also the movie starring Matt Damon and who played Nelson Mandela? It escapes my mind, but it's a great movie.
It was Morgan Freeman.
Morgan Freeman, thank you. Thank you. Moving along, any more questions?
I do have one, and I wanted to take a maybe more positive spin. We've been talking a lot about things that you know, are difficult, very difficult subjects. I don't know if you guys can see this picture. I hope you can. You know, we haven't mentioned today's Sport for Life, and we haven't mentioned the other pieces where, you know, we talked a lot about having a participation and then it turning into some sort of professional level. the reality is 99% of people that are going to join, we want to keep them in sport for life. If they come young, we're going to keep them for a really long time. And we are, now moving into an area here where, these are the kids that play for us now. And these are the kids who come to play against us from those places. And those parents come, they set up tents around the field. We all eat together. And it isn't like when I was a kid, when I didn't want my mom to put rotis in my lunch. I wanted a peanut butter sandwich because there was a danger to it. I know you guys are laughing, but in the 1970s, that was the way to certainly get beat up on the way home. And that happened very commonly to me. And these things, this was our commitment that we would stop and not allow this to continue. And so I want to ask, but on the positive side, I know that we've talked a lot about cricket, and there were some things said here that that cricket's the second largest sport in the world. That's not actually true. Field hockey is actually the second largest sport in the world. Basketball is by far number one right now. It's over 400 million players. Soccer is somewhere around 260 million. Field hockey is about just over 200 million and has the second largest federation, by the way. I wanted to ask, because of the last Olympics, there was an incredible breakthrough and a return. My cousins say, who are huge cricket fans as well, that cricket is in our head, but hockey is in our dill. I hope I say that right. And that hockey to field hockey to Indians is a very emotional thing. And having been out of the top of the hockey scene for such a long time now, so many, if not all major tournaments have now moved to India. The FIH president is now an Indian. And much to the advantage now, I think, of sponsorship and so on and so forth. We're seeing hockey academies open in India all over the place. The most incredible fourth place, the most celebrated fourth place finish of all time, I think, in the Olympics of the women's national team for India, who narrowly lost the bronze medal, and the men won a bronze medal after 40 years of being out of the medals. I wanted to ask, what the atmosphere in India is with respect to especially women's hockey, which appears to be on the verge of exploding, considering there's something to the order of 600 million women in India, and that this team seems to have captured the imagination of the country, at least from the outside. And if you know the movie Chuck the India, it's an amazing journey in the sense that this is life imitating art. So I'll stop there and ask if hopefully there's some positive thing we can talk about here.
Yeah, maybe Mr. Gaur might have.
I was hoping you.
More.
No, absolutely, Sandeep. No, you got it right. It's been a tremendous revival of hockey, field hockey. When I say hockey, I mean field hockey as an Indian. In India, and yes, the success of the women and the men's team in the recent Olympics was really catalyzed kind of thing. But this was actually a manifestation of the changes which have happened in the last 20 years in field hockey in India. Field hockey has a very interesting history in India. Again, it was not a game unknown to Indians in that we had played historically a game similar to hockey for hundreds of years. But when the British came, they kind of codified it and made it into a game which was used as a fitness regime for the army recruits. And the games were played on grass pitches, which allowed Indian players to develop a certain set of skills. Controlling the ball, dribbling is something we use in hockey. And those skills allowed them to kind of dominate global hockey for almost 50 years. India won 8 Olympic golds back to back. And then there were structural changes which happened in the West, actually, with introduction of AstroTurf as a surface of play. The whole nature of game changed. It kind of took the game away from the traditional style of play, which was prominent in India. And it took a long time for the Indian player, almost 2 generations, to catch up. And now they have. And as I think Steve said in his presentation, you know, the numbers then take over. If you have 500,000 or 2 billion people playing hockey, then you are going to see tremendous energy and money coming in, and leagues being formed and junior leagues being formed and getting sponsors from them. So the local grocery stores are willing to sponsor the women hockey team of the local school. That's the kind of change which is happening in India. That's what is propelling the change, and not just in field hockey. Women's sport in India is exploding across a range of sports. You take cricket. I mean, I had a picture of Smriti Mandhana there. She's as big a name, if not bigger, than Virat Kohli today in India. I mean, everyone knows she's a household name. The exploits of Indian women cricket team keep us glued to the screen as much as the men's thing. So yes, there has been a change. Look, we talked about a lot of sports separatism and division. Of course, there is divide. Of course, there are problems. I mean, then these are historic baggage that has been carried across. But that's the power of sport. It allows us to make the change. Every brown guy who, despite the chirping, goes on and takes his position on the rink. Every girl who goes the morning net session, despite, we call it hedging in cricket, which she receives, and they are bringing down the barriers. They are breaking the glass ceiling. And that's what sports allows you to do. That's why we play sport. That's the importance of sport. Now, sports alone cannot transform the society, but it's a great entryway. It's a beautiful entryway into, you know, building a more egalitarian, a more equal opportunity society for everyone. We're not there yet. Of course, we're not there. I mean, there are divides. You know, professional sport is expensive. It's very difficult for people to kit out and play properly. But every person who makes an effort is bringing about a change. And I think that really is the takeaway of sport, the power of sport for me.
Thank you. That's so really interesting to hear, you know, watching from afar what happened. It was, you know, I think it will be a watershed moment, even though it was not even a medal, but it was really incredible worldwide spectacle, I think, where everybody was cheering for them, regardless of you know, what their own country was. You know, personally, I really look forward to the possibility to move forward a little bit and see if the High Commission would be interested in connecting us with organizations in India with whom we can partner and eventually travel back and forth again when that's allowed to build those cultural pieces. And at the youngest levels. It's one thing to play at the international level, but when we bring 10, 12, 14-year-old kids together, this is where the real work is done. So I really thank you for your comments. I'm just going to post in the chat shamelessly the link to our project if anybody's interested to have a look. But I really look forward to the potential of finding, helping find some contacts that could facilitate something like that. So thanks.
Absolutely, Sandeep. We'd love to. I mean, we worked with Nalin showed you the video. We worked with OSEG and put together a hockey night for Indian students here. We recently supported a small cricket tournament of fresh arrivals from India, and we'll be very happy to take up hockey and, you know, field hockey and work with you. Get teams from India, get girls from here to India. That'll be really fantastic.
Great. That is really encouraging. Thank you.
I actually have a question, Richard, if I may ask, but there's been some very important points that have been made in the last dialogue, and it's true. I mean, when it comes to sports, if you want to reach the elite levels, one has to start young, and so that's a great place to start with the young ones, as Sandeep has proposed, and. But Zeena mentioned something which I actually had a similar experience to her. And, you know, when she asked Dr Szeto that the comments in her research that she shared from South Asian students, those were in BC, right? Because I also, like Zeena, did not experience that growing up and playing sports in Ottawa. And Ottawa was a lot more insular when we were growing up. You know, it wasn't as diverse as Toronto or BC. And, you know, the South Asian community obviously wasn't as big. You know, I mean, could Dr. Szeto perhaps comment on that? Because not all of us have had that negative experience. And the other thing that Richard mentioned, you know, as an athlete, in terms of how sports builds character, you know, and that mental strength that one has to have to overcome these type of barriers in order to compete and, you know, succeed. Well, that's all part of sports development and character building. And, you know, I do remember one girl who used to try to, you know, disturb my concentration just before a high jump, you know, during practice. But it all boils down to, I think, you know, the individual as well. And, you know, the support that they have to be able to build themselves, you know, whether it's mentally or socially, to focus on the goal. And that, in this case, is a sport.
Sure, so I'll jump in there. Yeah, so everybody that I interviewed was from BC, grew up in BC, or was living in BC. So like some of the parents had immigrated from India, but the younger generation definitely like grew up for the most part in BC, and some of them in small towns, and some of them played their hockey in Vancouver. I think that Vancouver is a very interesting space to study racial tensions, because it's often upheld as like the pinnacle of multiculturalism, but that multiculturalism is also the reason for a lot of racist hate in the city, whether it's at you know, Chinese real estate agents or what have you. So pejoratively, Surrey is still considered like Brown Town, and Abbotsford is like gangland. So there's a lot of racial tensions in Vancouver because of all the multiculturalism. And I think that, as some of the parents alluded to in my research, is like the more that South Asian players and parents and families started to take to the rink, that caused the tension, because it wasn't just one person anymore. Now it was like, oh, you're taking a lot of spots from the entitlement of a sport that they kind of felt like they deserved to be in, and that was their kind of safe place. So yeah, I mean, I'm glad that not everybody has that experience. That is definitely the hope. But I think, yeah, sometimes we have a lot of diversity, and that ironically can bring forth more racial tension than kind of let it subside, unfortunately.
So thank you. I see that we've reached the end of our session. Unless anyone else has a burning question, maybe we can, if you can send them to us through the ICFC website, through the Contact Us page. We can always send your questions through email to our speakers if our speakers are amenable to that.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, that's great. Richard, do you have any closing thoughts?
Well, I have something here. Like I said, I'm not adept at using Zoom, and I'm going to try and share the screen. Does this work? I want to close off with a quote. There was at this summer's Olympic Games. Am I on? Can you see? No?
Try again, Richard.
What do I do?
So
It's not odd.
The share screen at the bottom.
Yeah. 1 second here. Share a screen. Yes.
And then select the thing you want to share.
All right. So at this summer's Tokyo Olympic Games in the basketball competition, USA met Iran. We all know about the tensions between those two countries dating back to the 80s. Team USA won the game handily, but it was the comments afterwards by head coach Greg Popovich, who should probably be a diplomat when he retires. And this is what he had to say when the question was brought up of how it felt to play Iran against the USA. And I quote, "People in different countries get along a lot better than their governments do. The Olympics are a venue and a time where sports transcends all that petty crap. We just wish that was real life." And this kind of encapsulates what this talk was about this evening. And I mean, it touched on the broad subjects in sports, racism, the acceptance, but to me, it was a healthy discussion.
Thank you so much, Richard. And on behalf of the India-Canada Friendship Circle, we want to thank you for moderating today's panel and our guest speakers, Dr. Courtney Szeto and Dr. Stephen Desjardins, our co-host, Mr. Anshuman Gaur. Thank you to all our friends who joined us and asked those excellent questions. And as I mentioned, you can please keep them coming through email, and we'll be happy to continue this dialogue. And Nalin, thanks for joining us. That was a fun video. And Janice, Baressi, we look forward to continuing our dialogue with you too. I just wanted to quickly share that I went out and I got a little gift for our panel, and I'll find a way to get it to you. Yeah, so it's the sports bucket list, 101 sites every fan has to see before the clock runs out.
Nice.
So these are all the landmarks throughout the world where the Olympics have played, or the Super Bowl or Wimbledon, and then, you know, history and some landmark events and players. So that's just our token of appreciation, and we are very grateful for everyone who participated. And until the next time, everyone stay safe. And it was a fantastic session we had today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Good night.